What's going on, everybody? And I hope you're having a fantastic Saturday so far. This is NYG Jeffy T 85 here, and I'm going to talk about the New York Mets and what they might do internally to try to fill out the rest of their roster, including who might be the designated hitter going into this season. Now, obviously, we know about what the New York Mets have done so far in the offseason. Whether it's additions like Justin Verlander, Jose Quintana, as well as David Robertson and Brooks Raley in the starting rotation and the bullpen. Obviously, the New York Mets also retained Carlos Carrasco, Daniel Vogelbach, and Darren Ruff through picking up their options, as well as they've re-signed Edwin Diaz and Brandon Nimmo to long-term deals. Now, what do the New York Mets do in terms of that designated hitter position going into the 2023 MLB season? Well, there's been a lot of rumors rumbling about the New York Mets in terms of what they might exactly do at that designated hitter position. And honestly, everything that you keep hearing around the New York Mets is that they're actually in the belief about going into the MLB season using their young pit players, namely their top prospects, to help fill out that position in terms of the designated hitter position. And when I talk about the top prospects, it's the top four guys that all made their major league debut in some ways. Well, three of them at least. One of them is pretty much on the brink. And that, of course, is Francisco Alvarez, Brett Baty, Ronny Mauricio, and Mark Vientos. Obviously, the highest regarded of the four is Francisco Alvarez, who actually looks like he's going to be going into the season as the starting catcher for the New York Mets. Now, everybody knows the stats with these guys in the Major League. You know, what they were doing and how highly regarded these guys are. Alvarez, 5'11", 233-pound, starting catcher, 21 years old, played in Triple-A last year, came up for a cup of coffee with the New York Mets, and even had an appearance in that National League wildcard series against the San Diego Padres last year. Francisco Alvarez is going to be one of those players where the Mets are going to be hoping they can get a bang for their buck in terms of him at that catching position and at times being able to play DH if James McCann is still on this team, and then obviously you still have Tomas Nido. Brett Baty, in his first game as a New York Met after being called up from Triple-A-Syracuse, actually hit a home run in that game. It was actually off to a pretty decent start until he fractured his finger and missed pretty much the rest of the season. He primarily played third base for the New York Mets when he came up. Mark Vientos also played third base, and he even played a little bit of DH and outfield, just a little bit for the New York Mets. And obviously we know about Ronny Mauricio, who's honestly ripping it up right now in a Dominican League. These are the four guys that the New York Mets might be relying on when it comes to the designated hitter position heading into the 2023 season. Now, there is still potential for the New York Mets to go out there and sign a free agent like a J.D. Martinez, or even go out there and trade for an established DH if they're not satisfied with what they have internally, as well as what they have, in terms of the free agent market. But I really believe what Steve Cohen, Billy Appler, and Buck Showalter are saying, and that they're going to try to take a look at some of these kids they have on the roster internally and see what they can do during the beginning of the season. And then if they're not performing to the level that they think they can do, then I believe they're going to go out there and try to see if they can find an external option to replace that DH position. I definitely believe that Francisco Alvarez, Brett Baty, and Mark Vientos will be a part of the Major League roster in 2023. And there's an outside chance that Ronny Mauricio might be there too. But then you have to think, where are these guys going to play? Your outfield is pretty much filled right now. You figured going into the 2023 season. Brandon Nimmo is the starting center fielder. Starling Marte will be in right field. And you have Mark Canha playing in left field. You figure one of those kids might be starting at third base, whether it's Brett Baty or Mark Vientos. You also have Eduardo Escobar that could be an option there, as well as Luis Guillorme. At second base, you obviously have Jack McNeil. Shortstop, you have Francisco Lindor. Catching position is still wide open. You can start with James McCann if he's still here, and you could start with Tomas Nido, but I really believe the New York Mets are going to want to have Francisco Alvarez be the starting catcher going into the beginning of the season. But I believe all three, if not four of these kids, will be involved with the Major League roster in some capacity. And they're all still pretty young kids. Brett Baty's only 23 years old. He's the oldest amongst the four of them. Vientos is 22, and Alvarez and Mauricio are both 21. So these guys are all going to be some part key contributors in a way for the New York Mets. And I don't have any huge problem with the Mets wanting to try out these kids at designated hitter. But at the same time, I would bring in some type of established veteran to also push these young kids to maybe make them fight to get that designated hitter position in the lineup. I think Alvarez, out of the four of them, is definitely going to be the one that's going to play the most because of the fact he's a catcher and because the catching position is so weak. And if I had to pick second, I'd probably say Baty because I think Baty is just an overall better player than Mark Vientos is. And I think Vientos and Mauricio, if they're called up, might be into they might get some opportunities in the outfield / shortstop or infield position. I don't think Mauricio is going to get a real shot. There was options of him playing at third base. And that's the problem with this team right now, is you got Ronny Mauricio, you got Brett Baty, and Mark Vientos that all play around the third base position. They tried out Vientos in the outfield for a little bit, but he's more of a natural infielder. You still have that designated hitter position open, so you could rotate some of these guys at that designated hitter position going forward. But the question really is, are the Mets 1,000% sold on these young prospects that they're, building up and saying that they do not want to trade these guys and they want them to be given a fair shot and show what they can do during the Major League Baseball season? As you as a Mets fan, you have confidence in these young prospects that they can go out there and get the job done in terms of the designated hitter position, the catching position, and the third base position, which are arguably the three weakest spots on this New York Mets team. If you were going to rank these guys from 1 to 4, those four specifically because they're the closest ones to the Major League roster, Alvarez, Baty, Mauricio, Vientos, how would you rank them? And do you think that any one of these guys, if not multiple of them, deserve to be starting players heading into the Major League Baseball season? You have veterans like Vogelback and Ruff that can come in occasionally and spell them at the DH position as well. But at the same time, I have a little bit of faith, especially in Alvarez. I think the kid's got a great swing. He's got a power bat that the Mets need at the catching position. And Baty, I think, has got a sweet swing as well. And Mauricio's tearing it up right now in the minor leagues. Vientos is the one that gives me the biggest pause because I think he's just a guy. He's a solid player. He might be wrong. I hope I'm dead wrong. He looks like a solid player, but I don't think he's going to be on the level of the other three. But we'll have to wait and see what's going to happen, as I believe all four of these guys are going to get their opportunity to fill in at the designated hitter position and the third base position, as well as catching. Alvarez most likely for catching. So I just want to talk about how I felt about the designated hitter position if these kids will get an opportunity to participate and be one, and one of these guys might be the steady designated hitter going to the season. So that's just my little spiel I want to give about the New York Mets and how they were going to solve their designated hitter position, and if in fact they're going to go 100% internally for this. So if you like this video, hit the like button below. Sub up if you haven't already to NYGJeffyT85 for more breaking news, updates, chatter, and roster updates surrounding the New York Mets. Turn on the bell for notifications on the next video or short that's going to be dropping on the channel surrounding the New York Mets. And let me know in the comment section if you agree with how that was stated in the video about the Mets doing the right thing and trusting these young kids to be the internal options and let them go out there and see if they can win the catching, third base, and designated hitter positions going into the 2023 Major League Baseball season. So I thank you very much, everybody. Have a fantastic rest of your Saturday. Take it easy and let's go New York Mets. All you got to do is you got to believe in those boys from Queens.